Neelam Heera.
Thank you. Welcome to daytime telly, I think. I'm Danielle Palmour, and I'm the director of Friends Provident Foundation and a supporter of We're Right Here as a campaign. And I'm delighted to have a fantastic panel, some of which who have migrated to be online, which is slightly unsettling. So I'm really delighted to have everyone here, even Charlotte, who was actually not well at all. So I'll introduce who's in the room. Andy and Neelam are here. And Charlotte and Inayat are online, and Rokhsana. So what this session's about is really an opportunity to hear and to ask questions of people who have actually taken action in their communities and are making a difference now. And this is, a great, don't waste your chance here. Get straight on the Slido and put questions to people so that they can answer them. And anything you've ever wanted to know about community organizing and community action, this is your opportunity. And we'll be coming on to your questions in the second part of our discussion. But I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and start off with some questions. To Charlotte and Inayat, what challenges have you met in terms of taking action in your community? Starting with you first, Inayat.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here online, but I can feel myself sat in the audience there. Challenges, I think the biggest challenge I've had when I've dealt with the projects, and I'm not going to get into too much detail on the project, but you could have a look and I'm going to pitch it in now, you can have a look at the website, righthere.org. It tells you all about our different journeys and different stories. But the biggest challenge I've had is the partners, the local authority, the statutory authority, literally not being there in terms of supporting the journey that I wanted to take my neighbourhood, my local community. And I got the blessing, and it was like, yeah, we'll give you the blessing, but that real support wasn't there. I had to overcome it by really challenging myself over 10 years to really make a difference in my community, in the project I developed in terms of regenerating a historic Grade 2-star listed church facility into a community hub, which thrives to this day.
Fantastic. And Charlotte?
Yes, thank you. Well, we're a farmer, so we're based on the land, and we tenanted our land for generations, but then spent a decade fighting eviction notices as the landowner wanted to sell it for industrial development. And our struggle was basically lots of people with a lot more money, a lot more power and influence were making the decisions, and we had no money and had little influence, and we weren't being listened to. And the way that we overcome that was actually through the power of community. It was by gathering a community around us that started off local and then expanded out, that managed to open doors, and eventually we managed to not only negotiate an option to purchase the land from the original landowners, push the idea of industrial development out of the picture, but we're also able to raise £800,000 in less than 6 months. And it was that power of community that opened the doors, that allowed us to gain the skills, access to resources, gave us the positive energy, really, to believe it was successful when all of those with more power and influence were against us. The community were for us, and that really is what made it possible all the way through, and has meant now that Fordhall Farm has been placed into community ownership for perpetuity, and is not only here as a working organic farm, but is here as a core community resource.
Brilliant. And now I'm going to turn to those in the room. Andy, so tell me about your challenge, the challenges you've overcome.
Okay. So my organisation exists fully as a response by my community to state failure and market failure. It's as simple as that. So the state walked away and the land was left derelict after housing clearance. The old heritage buildings that were such a beautiful and valued part of our neighbourhood were abandoned also. And we came together to change that and to say that our neighbourhood was worth investing in, needed to change, and that rather than starting from the point of thinking that it was an ex-steelworking poor community with dereliction and derelict land and youth problems, it was a neighbourhood that was full of really talented people. It had that zeitgeist of makers of the steel industry still within it. We had climbers, we had youth workers, and we started there and rebuilt it. But that was 20 years ago. So the biggest challenge is it feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill every day.
And Neelam.
I can really agree with everyone's sentiments here. My journey is slightly different to my colleagues in that we don't have a physical space yet, and this has been part of the biggest blocker in terms of our work. So my organisation is Cysters, spelled Cysters, based after my ovarian cyst. And we were tackling health inequality at its core. So people that aren't getting their diagnosis, people that have chronic illnesses and they're not engaging with NHS services, are being told that they're a hard to reach community, but actually it's just because no one's actually bothered to find out how to work with those communities of colour, trans communities, etc. And that's why our work is for everybody and is intersectional at its core. One of the strands of the work we do, you may have heard or come across the phrase period poverty. So we essentially are volunteers within this space. We work with corporates to get period products and then distribute them to people that need them. The people that need them, not only food banks, but also the NHS. So we are supplying our local hospitals period poverty packs. So you can understand this is a wide-scale thing. This is not just a small effort. And in the Midlands alone, we've not been able to secure any space. For the last 6 years, we've been asking for just a central location to make it easier for our volunteers. And one of the biggest reasons we want a central space is I have no room in my flat. Everything is in my flat. I struggle to get through the door. My spare room is full of period products, and I'm doing this voluntarily, but I'm not getting any help back. Yet we are quoted in every single report that the council makes as making a difference. But no one has reached out to help us. When we've been sat in rooms, as you can tell, I'm a racialised person. I come from a community of colour. I'm always referred to in reports because I'm the token brown person. There are plenty of us in this space that are doing the work but are not being heard and not being supported. We don't need a pat on the back. We just simply need a space to actually house period products that are helping people that don't have the dignity of having a period without period products. Can you believe that I'm sat on this stage talking about period products to you? This is how far that this issue has become, and we really need to tackle it at its core and listen to the community. We've been really fortunate because of the help of Adam that the council are now engaging in conversation with us, and suddenly we have a space. But for the last 6 years, when somebody from a racialised community, the people doing the work on the ground have asked for that space wasn't available. And we talk about an unequal distribution of power generally, but it just showed how Adam, a CEO, who's never worked within this space, never actually, and I love everything that you do, Adam, this is no shade to you, but has never done this work on the space, never gone to people's homes to deliver period product packs to anyone, never worked in the community hubs that we've worked in, has made a simple few phone calls and emails and suddenly got space. When we have been asking for the last 6 years and we are doing the work on the ground, and this is where the problem is coming.
Now you hear the energy of this. And now what I want to know is what sustains that energy, what has helped you to get as far as you can. I know what's hindered you, but what, I'm going to ask all of you, what has helped move this thing you forward? Just one thing that, other than Adam, because this is not about Adam today. Sorry, Adam. But other than Adam, what else has been something that's really, other than your own personal energy as well, which is clearly there, what else? One thing.
Because communities they deserve equal access to healthcare. If we can act as that conduit between the NHS and medical professionals to get them the support they need, we can lower diagnosis times.
No, but what has helped you do what you've done?
It's literally that. So people don't live in pain for a long time. People get...
So the motivation helps you.
It's people. We want people to be leading healthy, better lives. We know that this works. We know that we need to be heard. And if I can let somebody in my space be heard and give them a platform, then for me, it's worth it.
Well, we've got Rokhsana here, the mayor of Newham. So, that's the thing you would, tell her what would help you. What would have helped you if that had been put in place? What could she give you other than motivation?
What would help us on a practical level is the structural barriers. As I've told you all.
Institutions.
Yeah, those barriers there, if they weren't existing and we had the space 6 years ago, we would have actually been able to grow massively.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have taken a third party to give us almost credibility in our work when we're actually doing the work on the ground. So it's listening to the people on the ground. They need to be heard.
That's great. And Andy, what would, if, we've got the council mayor here, if you had your mayor in your grasp, what would you ask for?
Wow. I don't think they could give me what I want, to be honest.
Okay.
We need a genuine structural change in the way we deliver neighbourhood renewal, whatever you want to call it now, place. Nothing about the way we are working with our neighbourhoods and with our economies right now is the right way to do it. It's just not the right way to do it. We're not sharing out the resources. We're not sharing out power. We're creating barriers and obstacles to moving forward, and we're creating all manner of excuses or reasons or processes for why we can't do this, we can't do that. And if one example, a few examples, it's like taking a stopper out of the bottle. After 20 years, I could just go on and on. But I have genuinely been asked to present a zero risk case for an asset transfer project. There's no such thing as that. That was an excuse.
Yeah.
So the change I want is actually enormous.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And just to ask Charlotte, if there was one thing that has helped you, what would it be?
All right. The one thing that has helped us today has been the power of people. We have 8,000 people that collectively own Fordhall Organic Farm, and if it wasn't for the sheer number of people that have supported us, both verbally, vocally, and sent £50 for that non-profit making community share, we would not have been able to overpower the power and influence of the minority locally that had different ideas for land use in our area, and that aren't even local people to add to the mix. Actually, if we didn't have that power of community, we would not be where we are today. And it shouldn't take 8,000 people to make that difference in a local community.
Yeah, and Inayat, just to ask you, before I turn to Rokhsana, to give a response from a local authority perspective, what has helped you overcome challenges?
Yeah, so as part of my project and the journey I've been over the last, when the project happened for 10 years, and now it's 19 years down the line, was the support I got from the national organisation, the Churches Conservation Trust, who believed in me and believed in my community to say that we could make a difference. They weren't in my community, they were outside as a national organisation, but with that belief, we strived on and basically made this project happen. And my feedback to all in working in communities and local authorities and statutory organisations, have your finger on the pulse of your community. They will give you the sweat and blood if you measured their pulse correctly, which literally means listen to them, work with them. They'll come up with the innovative ideas and the passion, the drive, the energy, even the financial support within local communities as well. And if you had the finger in the pulse, you can work miracles.
Brilliant, thank you. So it sounds like, and this is a terrible summary, so do correct me if I'm wrong, Rokhsana, if we thought about this, it sounded like trust is a central issue that people feel. Communities aren't being trusted, and then the institutional frameworks around a low trust environment create barriers. And that's a terrible, terrible simplification, but I think that's kind of at the heart of it. Is there anything from a local authority perspective that you can see can overcome some of that to really let communities take charge?
Thank you very much for the question, and I was really interested in hearing the reflections and experiences of other panelists, and I just wanted to do a quick shout out to Neelam, because I was very touched by what she said, because there was quite a lot of resonance in her expressions around being from a community of colour with regards to the additional overlay of marginalisation that groups of colour, when they're engaging with local authorities and those in positions of power, can experience when they're trying to have their voice heard. And I can't account for every single local authority in local government here in the country, but I can account for what I've been delivering in the London Borough of Newham, where I was the directly elected mayor back in 2018. And I stood on a platform of reversing the trust deficit that existed between the people and the council at that time, and very much presented myself as a social activist, very much anchored in that social activist background that many of our panel speakers represent. And I made a promise that, as part of reversing the trust deficit here in Newham, that I would transform Newham into a beacon of participatory democracy. And in addition, addressing some of the comments that Andy has made with regards to the challenges that he's experienced and the marginalisation that has led to in terms of involvement in place shaping, place making, the absurdity of being asked by a council officer to present a zero risk model for or business plan for his project, because he's right, a zero risk model does not exist, and local authorities operate within the context of risk in any case every single day, risks around borrowing that they undertake in quite significant amounts. So I can very much understand Andy's frustration. But going back to what we've put in place since I stepped into office 4 years ago, in part linked to our Beacon of Participatory Democracy agenda, but more importantly linked to our approach to our local economy that's based on community wealth building and inclusive growth, because the existing economic models that have been pursued in this country, both at national level and at local level, have ill-served the residents of Newham, which I must say is a population comprising of some 78% ethnic minority communities and a very, very young population at that. 34% of our resident population are under the age of 24. And it's important for me to set that context in response to your specific question, and just really to remind you, I can't account for what other local authorities do. But in the context of Newham, as part of that trust deficit reversal that I promised that I would progress with in my first full term, we've introduced a whole number of features to involve residents in decision making and in shaping their neighbourhoods and their local areas. So we've done through the drawing down of what is known as community infrastructure levy. That's money that we collect through developers that have applications that they submit to the council for big developments or small developments, and the contribution that they make for community infrastructure. I've allocated £1.6 million of community infrastructure levy monies that can be spent across 8 of our neighbourhoods here in the borough. It's the largest participatory budget exercise anywhere in the country. We've also established a permanent citizen assembly. This is an assembly comprising of a cross-section of our resident population that are involved with the council in determining a whole range of different strategies and informing our thinking across really important strategic areas, be it 15-minute neighbourhoods or green in the borough. So all of this is being embedded at the moment, and this is in the context of a local authority that very much was top-down, very paternalistic in its approach and thinking to the resident community. And I've also had to instigate a change programme within the council so that they are outward facing and more involving of residents. And through areas such as regeneration, placemaking, we're putting it in place and have done for a considerable period of time over the last 4 years. Co-production, co-design in all aspects of council-led housing delivery and regeneration schemes. So Newham is an example of what other local authorities can do, and just by way of concluding, in addition to those specific things that I've mentioned, you know, the neighbourhood assemblies where £1.6 million has been allocated across 8 neighbourhoods for residents to get involved, develop project ideas, submit them, they get voted by residents, a permanent citizen assembly, the approach through co-production, co-design in all of our regeneration schemes. The other thing that we are doing is through our community wealth building and inclusive growth strategies here at the council, we're ensuring that we're unlocking the assets of the council for our people. So I heard Neelam talk about, you know, they desperately needed a community facility in order to store all the various products that they're distributing for women from the South Asian and communities of colour, as well as LGBTQI communities, and through our asset management, where we've placed at the heart community wealth building and social value as a lens that we apply to our assets that we own, we're able to unlock assets for the benefit of our communities.
Sorry, I wasn't leaving. I was just moving over so that I could read the questions more easily. So I obviously sat in the wrong place. But thank you very much for that. But one of the questions I had that came from that was, moving beyond regeneration, though, this is actually about the way the council and local authorities work as a whole, as opposed to just on regeneration points. I mean, is there thought about that more broadly, that co-production could apply more broadly?
Absolutely, and just to clarify, the co-production, co-design is not just in the context of regeneration schemes and placemaking, place shaping. It's symbolic of a methodology, approach, a practice that is transforming the way in which the council functions and how it interfaces and establishes and develops relationships, trusted relationships with the community as part of that wider participatory democracy agenda that I referred to. So, you know, they cannot be viewed in and of themselves in isolation. They need to be understood in the context of the neighbourhood assemblies, where we're allocating £1.6 million, drawing down on community infrastructure levy monies, the permanent standing citizen assembly, the co-production, co-design as it pertains to regeneration, but a co-production, co-design practice that is hardwired and is being hardwired into the method and the approach that the council, that comprises of people. A council isn't an entity, you know, that's just a robot or machine. It's made up of people. We have 4,500 staff, a significant number of which actually live in the borough, and it's important as part of the participatory democracy agenda that we're advancing here locally, that our staff team, our officer team, who are public servants, they know that they're here to be serving our people and working collaboratively, are equipped with the skills and the know-how about how best to undertake that practice.
No, that's brilliant. I suppose one of the questions I have is, people are in different places in the country, and how do we move some of this activity, some of the structural change that you're trying to make, Rokhsana, but the different contexts in which people find themselves to be something beyond anecdote? Like, oh, they're doing it like this here, and how do we move it to being much more structural? Obviously, We're Right Here campaign is really about making it statutory. Is that going to solve the issue, do you think, Neelam? Do you think that's going to really move it forward in terms of if it's a statutory requirement that the community must be listened to and have power and that kind of decision-making is devolved? Do you think it would help?
I think it will make a difference, but we also need a level of representation of people that aren't already being heard. Even in this room alone, the people that I work with, they wear turbans, hijabs. I can't see them in the room. They're still not in the places that they should be in and talking on the stages that they should be in. And I think that's part of the problem. We're not uplifting those communities that should have a space. Whilst we can get things done on a statutory level, that's still not going to give the confidence to the people on the ground to actually come forward and say, well, I am a community leader and I can do this, because we've never given them a voice and a platform or a table to be able to do so. So what we've done and what they've done, we've created our own tables and our own spaces. And that's why a lot of the people that we work with, they're so disillusioned with policy and politics because they've had to create their own space, their own safe spaces. And I think that's part of the problem. We need to galvanize and work with these communities better, and then bring them on the journey with us rather than tokenizing them at some point and saying, oh, well, this is for you, when they should have been part of that co-production journey all the way through.
Andy, brilliant. Your thoughts on that? Will legislation help?
Yes, it will.
And?
Not enough, but it'll be a really good start. So I've been around long enough to remember the first time we started to talk about double devolution and neighbourhood renewal. And I got very excited. We were at a point in our trajectory as a community movement in Sheffield that we were in charge of funding. We were structurally changing our neighbourhoods, and we had a dialogue about planning our neighbourhoods for the future. We had a newspaper for what it would be like in 20 years' time where we lived. And we were going to come back and have a look at it. Our current community plan is 2 years long in our neighbourhood, and that's not good enough. So we need to bring this campaign about because it forces the change. Even if it's a little bit, it starts a dialogue about how we work together better and differently. There's a failure of understanding between the two parties. It's almost adversarial. And what we need, the crisis, that we're facing in our neighbourhoods is really enormous. I don't hear the dialogue about how big it is. So we can't do it on our own. We can't do it as the state. We can't do it as communities without working differently together. Out there now, there are primary school kids in my neighbourhood carrying weapons to youth club because they're scared, People in my neighbourhood, the life expectancy in my town is going down, not up. So you sort of live, the papers are encouraging us to talk about hating each other and hating others. There's a war between cyclists and car drivers. All of these things are in the way of us having really beautiful, productive neighbourhoods where people feel part of the future, and I'm really worried. So yes, we need change, and if we don't force it in, double devolution will happen again. And every time it doesn't work, it disengages people even more. And we were just having this conversation coming in, weren't we?
Yeah.
How do we get people to believe in legislation anymore? Yeah. So the way to do it is to bloody deliver.
I think it's really helpful as well from what you're hearing here is that the campaign is the start of the journey, absolutely not the end, and there's so much more to be done in terms of getting those trusted relationships. And it's interesting because Rokhsana sounds like she was starting almost from trying to build the trust before the legislation. And it's kind of like these two things have got to come together. Do you think, Charlotte, that that's the way forward in terms of legislation? Would that actually have helped you?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's, I love and hear what Mayor Rokhsana's doing. I think that's absolutely fantastic down there, because trust has absolutely got to be part of the answer, and a big part of the answer. And potentially you could do it all on trust, but unfortunately we live in the real world, and you just need the wrong person in the wrong job and it starts to fall apart. And that is why you've got to come at it from both ends. And I think for those people that are in those positions that are lacking a bit of confidence of giving that trust, but might want to give that trust, I think that legislation also gives that backbone to it that can't be taken away. And I think that's what's really important, is a structural system is put in place that permanently exists and won't change depending on who's in power, who's in the local council, and what those personal agendas might be. But trust and the culture and the values that are behind it, as Mayor Rox was absolutely right, have got to be filtered down to every level of the system to make sure that it is implemented right. And it's absolutely incredible to hear what she's doing down there, and it'd be really interesting to see what learnings from that can filter into this campaign as well, because as you rightly said, this is the start of the journey.
Brilliant. Inayat, I was just wondering, one of the questions from the audience is really about cynicism, and we've heard a little bit about cynicism about legislation, but also cynicism about community power. Is that something that you've encountered and overcome, or is it something that's still a big issue for you?
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's important to, first of all, just share what we're trying to do as the campaign. We're trying to, our ask literally is to give communities the right to self-determination, when decisions are made, and having grassroots having a say in terms of the decisions that are made locally. We're trying to say that local community covenants should be set up, wherein whether they're called assemblies, forums, alliances. Very glad to hear my town in Bolton, they're taking a journey, and I'm really pleased to see that they're trying to create alliances within neighbourhoods and communities to give them the power that, what we're trying to aim for. And ultimately, one of the key asks is that we want an independent Community Power Commissioner to oversee this, to ensure that the job does get done. There is somebody there checking on local authorities on the grassroots and saying, do things happen? Different towns, different cities have different ways of working. One size does not fit for all. But what I do see is some are doing better than others. And the act and the drive and the national campaign we're pushing forward is to get the right messages from the government level, to put it in statute, to ensure that communities have the right, have the power on the ground, working with local authorities who are going to be accountable. At the same time as well, I do feel for local authorities where the money's been cut and they've been asked to shave money left, right and centre. The key bit here is work with the local community and you will get your answers.
That's a great segue into one of the most popular questions that's coming from the panel, and it starts, I think, with Rokhsana, really. The question is, what do you say to council leaders who are frightened to take the steps that you've taken in Newham? But also, I want to ask the rest of the panel, what would you say to council leaders who are frightened to devolve power, to share power, not even like give it away, but actually sharing it? I mean, what is the thing to overcome? What is one thing you would say to overcome that kind of fear, other than come on in, the water's fine, it's okay? What would you say, Rokhsana?
I probably would frame it a slightly different way, because I don't think it's about fear necessarily. I think it's about normative political culture and practice, which in this country, which, let's not forget, is the most centralised democracy in the world, without it becoming a dictatorship. So that's one thing. We've got an inherent political culture in this country which is centralised, and that inevitably will filter into local government. So I think it's less about fear, it's about not knowing any other way. And then I think it is compounded and exacerbated by political cultural norms across all political parties, where they are very keen to retain and keep hold of power and practice that power in a very binary way. And I would say to fellow political leaders, certainly come down to Newham here in the east of London, see the changes that we have implemented, see the way in which that's required a change in how the council as an organisation is organised and adapts its practice, and see the corresponding benefits that leads to in terms of credible outcomes and a enhanced participation of residents in what is happening in the borough as part of a collaboration between the council and the people about the future of the borough. Because, as Andy said, the council can't do it itself. It needs to be open, it needs to be outward looking, it needs to be involving, and that's exactly what we're putting in place here in Newham.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I mean, Charlotte, your thoughts. So what would you say to a council leader that's just as frightened?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Mayor Rox has said, and I'd say, come down and see us at Fordhall as well. We are governed by 8,000 community members, and actually when we set up back in 2006, my brother, who was the tenant farmer of one landlord at the time and now finds himself the tenant farmer of 8,000 landlords, had a similar concern. What if 8,000 people all come and start telling me to farm differently, or to, get involved with decisions that they don't understand? But actually what we've found is the weight of that community engagement, the consultation, the involvement of them has done nothing but give us strength and empowerment to us and to all of our members that are involved throughout our whole journey. And it means every challenge we face has been easier overcome because we've got the support of so many people around us. And I would like to think that councils will find the same situation, is as they're coming across challenges that they're trying to overface, when you do that as a whole community, it's a completely different kettle of fish as well. And more solutions start to present themselves, more opportunities, more out of the box thinking, and adapting to those situations, I guarantee, becomes much easier than it currently is.
Yeah. So what we've had so far is, it's quite interesting. We've got sort of the idea that actually you do get better solutions, actually, if you engage the community. And also you were saying, Rokhsana, about, the depth and quality of the democracy is improved by people's engaging. And just, is there anything you would say, Inayat? You did say beforehand, but is there anything, final nugget you would give to a council leader?
I would, I'll say it again, to all councils, council leaders, politicians working with communities, within communities, is have your finger on the pulse of the community, work with them, and don't be afraid of giving communities power. You'll gain more power. Yeah. Sometimes, councillors and people giving more power means we'll lose power. It's actually the reverse. Give more power to the community and you'll gain more power.
That's a great nugget. Andy, final thing you would say to a council leader that's got fear of the situation? I mean, you've given a pretty stark picture of the current. Is it just saying, you know, this will move you on from that?
Sure. Blimey. So I recall going to a meeting about saving a building that was going to be sold out of a park, and very shortly afterwards there was an election. 3 councillors, they were all out, and the number of people at the final set of meetings to discuss the future of the building, at which one of those 3 councillors turned up, was about 500. And that councillor lost 500 votes compared to the others on their ballot. So the power, I think, of how you have a dialogue with local people it can be really influential. Bear in mind, I come from the city that used the police and the private sector to go to war with its citizens over a set of trees, you know. So we've made some mistakes, you know. I'm currently, we're going through a committee system, and I'm attending a lot of community meetings with the council. So my take home is, you can't do community development work. You can't, and you shouldn't try. You should work with us, and we can sort it out because we really want to help. It's as simple as that, as far as I'm concerned right now. Asset-based community development can only be done by those assets. That's local people. And the argument that always comes back, and I'm sure is out there now, is, but not every community is the same, and not everywhere can be trusted like that. Well, I reckon in the last 20 years, I've spent 2 of those years, literally 2 of them, filling in the name and address and company details of my business at the start of re-tendering another project that we delivered really well last time. Literally that. I reckon there are 2,000 copies of our Mem and Arts in the City Council. I know they've not read them because I've started writing things in the margins when I send them in, and nobody's commented.
Don't do that, though.
Right? It's not new stuff, this, right? There are organisations out there in Halifax. I can see somebody in the audience, right? There are people out there all over the country, 25, 30 years of running contracts, working in the private sector, working in market failure, working alongside local authorities and working against them. If we didn't have to spend all our time developing zero-risk cases and filling in forms, we can help. The expertise is out there. We need change, and we need to be enabled to do it. And local authorities are really necessary in that.
Absolutely.
They need to be confident and strong and enabling, but they need to be alongside. You know, and in Sheffield we have a dialogue about parent and child relationships between the state and our sector. And I've got teenagers, and it's a humbling experience, right? It's really humbling, because I now know how little I know about anything. And so parent and child relationships between state and our sector, what I need to say is, it's time you got your laundry in the basket and put those dirty dishes in the dishwasher, please. Come and work with us properly, like grown-ups.
I've left the last word for Neelam. You, because you're so popular. But also, you know, really, what would you say? People who are just frightened to give people power.
So let's put this in the context of the work we're doing in Birmingham.
Yeah.
They must be frightened because they haven't made contact with us.
Exactly.
So that's one of your answers there. There's been a lack of reach. No one's wanted to know what's happening in the community unless it comes to a report. Then they want to know what's happening in their community, and we'll send out a survey, what's happening in your local area. But otherwise, no one's actually ever directly said, oh, you're doing this, Neelam, how can we help you? And that's half the problem. No one does reach out to the grassroots communities to say, this is what we're doing, this is how we can work and co-produce things together. None of these people who are on the journey with Cysters see themselves as community leaders. It's a title that I'm not quite comfortable with because I don't see ourselves as leaders. We're just doing the work that should be done. And I think there's also an element of we need some hand-holding around this. So we could benefit a lot from the local councils, but just take us on the journey with you to tell us what we need to do better. We can do that. We've got the energy and the drive to do this in the communities. We are the experts. We've got lived experience of it. But half the problem is, if there's anyone from Birmingham, help me out, because we want to have engagement with our local councils. We've just had so many promises made to us over the last 6 years, and then people just sort of disappear. And I think it's got to the point where we've got a youth group within Cysters, a youth board, because we want to upskill them. And we've had so many promises made. I bring all the youth people in our meetings because I want them to learn at a younger age rather than at my age what they need to be doing to create change. So you're talking about 18-year-olds who have got some fire in their belly and not as tired as me. And I want them to learn and have these experiences. But if no one's reaching out to us, then this is just a conversation that we just keep having year upon year.
Really powerful. I mean, you've heard it here. We've gone a bit over time. I'm sorry, Adam probably is going to never ask me back again. But anyway, I think it's been such a rich conversation, and you guys have been so good at sharing your thoughts and your insights. And Rokhsana, thank you so much for coming along and being open and sharing what you're doing in Newham, because I do think it's inspirational. I think there's loads more to do, but I think, we've talked a little bit about the beginning of this journey, but it is not far enough. Or fast enough at the moment. So, I mean, what we've heard now is that, if this can actually start to happen, we actually deepen our democracy, we actually get more power into the locality, and there's huge energy that's unleashed in terms of the members, 8,000 members, or people who come along to meetings and care about things in a community. So it's all to play for. But hopefully you can just join with me to thank our fantastic panel, and I'll hand back to Adam.